What is up, Heisters? Noli here, and welcome to another Payday 2 video. This one has been a really long time coming, and I've been talking about it for as long as I can remember. It is my brand new, freshly designed skill tree, the Pugilist skill tree, for you melee users out there. But just to get this straight before I get any further into the video, this is not data mine, this is not speculation, this is not something that Overkill has planned as far as I'm aware, and they certainly don't have all these ideas planned, even if they do intend to add another skill tree to the game. This is just sort of creative freedom, and this is the sort of thing that I want to try and prompt from the Payday community. With a workshop more than likely coming within the next month, we want this sort of creativity, and I'd like to see it try sort of breeding in the comments section. So if you guys have any of your own ideas, if you have your own skill tree, if you'd like to change my skill tree or balance it out a little bit better, that is all encouraged. Just before I get onto it, one of the main reasons I wanted to do a skill tree was because there's going to be a 5th character very soon, so maybe that is when we'll get a new skill tree. And on top of that, I've spent an awful lot of time with melee weapons. If there's one field in Payday 2 that I know, it's melee weapons. I got kind of obsessed with them. I think they're the most enjoyable way to play the game, but they're also kind of weak. So that's why I wanted to get very involved and make them more viable, even though that might involve ridiculous RPG elements. But Payday 2 calls itself an RPG on Steam, so whatever. Let's get on to the skills themselves. I'm really excited to go through this with you guys, but remember, communication and corrections are advised. The only things that I don't really need correcting on is if I've made spelling mistakes or if I've made numerical errors. When I say numerical errors, I mean if I've typed a 2 instead of a 5. I know I do that at one point for the cost. You don't need to tell me about those, but if you think the numbers are completely off and those would be make no sense at all, they'd be overpowered or underpowered, let me know those. But spelling mistakes wise, sometimes I notice them. I just didn't want to remake the little tooltip you're going to be seeing coming up on screen. It took me hours to make. And so I wanted to get this video out the window within the next damn week, so I decided just to upload it as it was. Let's talk about the Pugilist, which is the just unlocking the equipment that comes with it. And honestly, this is the shakiest skill I have in the entire tree, so it's only uphill from here. But the Pugilist is a psychopath with a true death wish. Haunted by their past, they can be both obsessively efficient and manically violent. Spending the first point in the Pugilist skill tree unlocks the shock armor deployable. The shock armor can be used to raise armor value and resistances. Shock armor has 4 charges. So I've been about as vague and cryptic as Overkill often is with their skills, but basically I imagine when I put it in the equipment description itself, I'd explain exactly what the equipment does. It gives you, in my opinion, this is the idea for it, but of course very open to revising it, 300 armor as standard. That does not make you heavier or move slower, but as that armor is destroyed, it doesn't recharge. While the armor is on you, you get increased resistances to screen shaking, to melee, and to explosives. Once the armor is destroyed, for the following 30 seconds, you move 20% faster. That sort of idea. I'm not sure how well balanced that would be. Also, shock armor has 4 charges. That might be a little bit too powerful when you're heisting on your own, but the idea is everyone in your team gets one. It doesn't make much sense otherwise. I don't really touch this idea later on in the skill tree. That may be one place the skill tree could improve, building on this shock armor idea. Or maybe if you guys have your own equipment ideas that would fit in nicely with the skill tree, I'd love you to let me know again in the comments. Now, as far as skill trees that exist are concerned, usually there are three parts to the tree, each have a different theme behind it. So you have, best example I imagine is Technician. You have along the right side column all the drilling skills. The middle column you got your C4 skills, and on the left hand side you get your sentry gun skills. That's where the definition is made. With my melee ideas, it goes damage on the left, so damage will be the first one I talk about. Then it will be support, that's the second one. And finally, stealth, the third one. You'll notice the pattern, it'll keep going round 3 at a time in triplets. Usually with the first one, I'll talk about the tier bonus. Only one time do I talk about it in the last of the 3 skills, and that's at tier 6, so that's much later on in the video. So, Crippler. Each time a melee strike fails to knock an enemy down, the likelihood the next swing will is increased by 30%. There needs to be a bit of punctuation there. When knockdown occurs, the chance resets. Then if you ace this out, enemies recover 20% slower from knockdown. So the idea is it's going to make your knockdown more consistent. With some of the high knockdown weapons, you're going to basically be knocking them down all the time anyway. But remember, the fear is you can only knock down one man at a time. But this is more designed around some of the heavier hitting, slightly slower swinging knockdown weapons. But once you've procced it twice and it hasn't knocked them down, the fourth one will undoubtedly knock them down. Then of course the chance resets, so it's not like you're consistently knocking enemies down. Thanks to this skill, I should say. You might be if you add it to other skills. And there's one thing that I haven't done enough in this skill tree. It's actually taking a look at the existing melee skills that exist. You can absolutely correct me on that. The second part of this skill, the aced out part, is not entirely related, but that 20% slower recovery from knockdown is going to be helpful throughout the heist, and also it synergizes well with some later skills in this tree. The tier bonus weapon swing speed is increased by 20%, greatly needed, but maybe by the time you finished reading through this skill tree, you might think that 20% more swing speeds are going to be a bit overpowered. That is definitely something that I may look to revise, but right now, if I could get 20% faster swing speed as a tier bonus on melee weapons, I certainly would. The second skill, and this is, as I said, the support skill, is Splinters. Each time a melee strike connects with an enemy, bullet resistance increases by 10% for 5 seconds per stack. One thing to note is I've sometimes kind of struggled to fit my percentages in. That's just because of the way I created these little tooltips. It was a little bit complicated and a bit of a mess, but I actually get better as the tooltips go on. So by 19 it looks much nicer. Then if you ace this out, you gain a further 5% bullet resistance and an additional 20% melee resistance. So the idea behind this is it lets you really get up in enemies' faces. As long as you're hitting, you're going to be taking less damage and you can't be meleeed for the same, assuming you've got it aced. It's going to allow you to stay up close and personal for much longer. Really something that the melee weapon tree needs. Next up, we have our stealth-based skill, but of course these can be useful outside of stealth as well. We have Brace. Charging a melee strike makes movement silent, then you can move 100% faster while crouching and charging a melee attack. Charging in stealth seems completely pointless at this point, but with these skills it could make running around with a melee weapon in stealth much more effective. And you just move too damn slow when charging for it to really be effective. And there's a couple of skills that I talk about later on that change that anyway. Brace isn't all that interesting, but it's definitely something that ghosts might want to take a look at. Oh, and also, bearing in mind, I only imagine if they add another skill tree, they'd also have to raise the level cap slightly, or at least let you get some more skill points. Maybe. I'm not sure how they choose to balance it. Next up, we have another one of these aggressive perks. We have Fast Hands. Weapon charge time reduced by 50% for all weapons. 50 might be a little bit lofty. That means a 1 second charge time for some weapons, and they are going to be swinging. But if that's what we're relying on, essentially, it might be relatively well balanced. My only issue with this is it's only tier 2. It's quite a big step up for tier 2, so maybe lowering that 50% would be prudent. Now, if you ace it, you reduce time between melee swings and gun readiness. Now, this is a difficult concept to get across in words. Basically, the idea is once you swing, you can shoot again almost immediately, as opposed to being stuck between animations. It's simple, but it would actually really help the fluidity of melee within Payday. Then the tier bonus is increased shield regeneration for you and your team. Remember, we do want some of these skills to be quite supportive by 10%. Regen, tankiness, and movement are some of the main things we are looking for in our melee tree. Next up, we have Strength from Pain. Damage taken while armor is down is converted into armor recharge time. Your shield will recharge 3% faster for every tick of damage. Then if you ace that out, 15% of damage taken to your armor is converted into healing. Now, this is a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy. The idea behind this one is once you've lost your armor and you're taking hits, as you take hits to health, your armor is going to recharge that much faster. Every tick of damage means every single bullet that hits you is going to give you a 3% faster shield recharge rate. And I don't mean the rate that the shield comes back up, because it comes back almost instantly. I mean the time between the shield being down and back up again. Then, once you have your shield up, 15% of damage taken to your armor is converted into healing. This was a tough number to balance for me, because if you think about it, a fully destroyed, improved tactical, well, actually let's just say we have 200 armor, which is quite a lot. We lose all of that at once. That means we only get, what, 30 healing? That's not that huge, is it? So is 15% balance? Well, if you think about it, you're going to be getting hit for half and then recharging, half and recharging. It might be a little bit too much regeneration, and you may become semi-invincible. But don't forget how frequently you have to get in people's faces as a melee user. That is something I've tried to keep in mind at all times. Next up, we have Silent Takedown. All melee kills are 100% silent, but incorporate a 2-second takedown animation. I've wanted this for such a long time. Takedown animations seem like they make so much sense in a game that loves its stealth, but we don't have them yet, and making them silent might be just the way forward, and it would allow you some control over where the body drops. Increase concealment value for each successful melee takedown by 10 points. Not hugely useful if you're basically already at base concealment, but if you choose to take one of the heavier melee weapons in case things go south, picking up kills with your melee weapon is really going to increase your stealth throughout the mission. More useful for the longer ones like Big Oil or Framing Frame, I guess. So next up, we are on to tier 3 now. We have Dull Blows. Can now run while charging swings, hugely important I think to the charge mechanic to make that more viable. Additional damage and knockdown from charging is increased by 25%, making charging that much stronger. Then if you ace this out, base melee weapon damage is increased by 30%. Is that a bit lofty? I don't know. Is it a bit cheap? Well, there's a lot of skills in Payday 2 that are just like there at face value. Here, take 30% more, 35% faster shotgun reload speed, for example. That sort of thing. So I thought it was okay to do in this situation. I definitely wanted a damage buff in there at some point. The tier bonus for tier 3 is increased melee weapon concealment by 20%. Yeah, since they've added concealment values onto melee, I at least wanted to make a way to balance that out a bit, because it just felt like a nerf. I know it makes sense, but why nerf what is already one of the weaker sections of the game? Now for our support skill here, we have Call to Arms. Call to Arms: for each melee kill you complete, all damage must be done with the melee weapon, so it's not that cheap. Your crew's weapon damage will increase by 2%. Then if you ace this out, you and your crew gain an additional 1% health for each kill completed. Long-standing buffs are important. I don't know whether 2% is a little bit too high, but if you think about it, the number of melee kills you're getting on your own throughout an entire mission is probably not going to top 30. That's 60% damage increase, but it's slowly ticking over the mission. It's only at its highest as the mission's about to end, and the additional health, only 1% per kill. You'll be lucky if you double your health by the end of the mission. So I'm slightly worried about the balancing of Call to Arms, but I'm not sure how I should place those percentages otherwise. Next up we have Sleep Tight. Civilians can be subdued permanently by silent takedowns without penalty. For the longest time this has made sense to me. Civilians need to be incapacitated without you losing out. Yet at the same time, you can't just go around freely and unpunished just taking them out of the equation. This animation is lengthy, so if you try and do it during the mission, it's 2.5 times longer than the standard stealth takedown. So if you try and do it while in open mission play, you're going to have problems with this. And also, once you've done it to civilians, they can't be removed or bagged. I know this doesn't make an awful lot of sense, but it's sort of a bit of forced balancing. Now, if you ace this, you can move at 50% speed while performing a silent takedown, and can move for a further, I suppose to say, 25 seconds with the body at 25% speed. Don't know why I missed that out. The idea behind that is, essentially, you're going to be wandering along, you get your kill, and you pull them out of line of sight, and then beyond that, so you can save a body bag, you can move them further. But during that time, you're at risk of being spotted because you're more obvious, you're obviously not crouching. So it's a risk versus reward thing. Oh, and moving at 25% speed, I assure you will be slow, and body bags will still be very important. But I did want to make this takedown animation more worthwhile. Think Dishonored if you've played much of that game. Brutality is the tier 4 Suddenly we're on to the 4-pointers. These are the more expensive, much heftier skills, and brutality of course is in our more damage based tree. Melee strikes that knock a law enforcer down slow their movement speed by 35% for the next 25 seconds. Knockdown needs more interaction. Slower law enforcers after they've been knocked down might not be that important because you expect yourself to kill the enemy once they've been knocked down. Just to specify, it's knocked down by a melee strike, not by like a grenade explosion. But it also kind of makes sense if you're smacking them hard enough where they're falling to their knees into the floor. You're obviously doing some serious structural damage, so that was my idea with that one. You and your crew, if you ace this out, are 20% more likely to dodge bullets than an enforcer who's been knocked down. Again, looking at knockdown, seeing what we can do to buff it, and using the dodge mechanic, because dodge is sort of like being an evasion tank with the melee builds. Dodge makes a little more sense than armor to me at most times, and so that's why I've tried to buff the dodge stat. Dodge is already applied on armors if you're wondering where that stat is hidden. The tier bonus for this one is an 80% resistance to all explosives. You're going to be up in the faces of the enemy. You don't want your teammates having to pull grenades and not throw them for fear of wounding you. 80% resistance is really strong, but because it's not that, it's quite a situational tier bonus, I had to make it a high percentage. Next up we have Warcry. This is where the support really gets going, as you increase all the damage resistances for you and your crew within 15 meters by 40% for 30 seconds. This Warcry has a 5-minute cooldown. Imagine Wolf screaming at the top of his lungs for his team to fight. That was my idea with this one, and as far as 15 meters are concerned, I measured this thing out with the special sniper scope that shows you distances. That's how I sort of vaguely get what my spatial distances are and where I should put the figures in these skills. On top of that, you increase all damage outputs for you and your crew within 15 meters of your Warcry by 30% for 30 seconds. Similar idea if you ace this thing out, except you get more damage on top of the resistances. Really important. I don't know whether 5-minute cooldown's too long or too short. I'm sort of on the fence on that one, or it might be just right. I'd have to get your feedback. Whistle is the stealth skill that I think a lot of us have been wondering about for a while. And it's very hard to do, and I can understand why Overkill hasn't done it. Can now whistle during stealth. Makes guards investigate noise the first time they hear it. Multiple uses will result in calling for more guards and immediate alarm raising. Whistle spots enemies in a 20... Actually, we'll get onto that aced part a little later. I'd rather talk about this part separately and then get onto the aced out whistle. So the idea behind this is it's similar to games like Far Cry 3. You throw a rock at a wall, an enemy moves toward it. And this will work once, basically. The second time you use it, you're going to get different effects. If you use it 3 times and above, you get an increased likelihood the next whistle is going to just result in an immediate alarm raising. That's the idea behind this one. So you can't just spam whistle, mess with guards all day. They get wise to you and they just immediately phone for backup. But if you whistle, say, twice, the guard gets even more alert. They search harder, they search wider, and they may even call guards nearby to help them look. This can be used strategically, and it can also catch you out. I'm hoping to make this idea as skill-based as possible. So whistling spots enemies in a 25-meter radius for 10 seconds. That's going to really help you get the lay of the land, but of course, be careful because you may get spotted out while doing it. Also, you can choose to whistle, shout, or whisper for alternate results. One of the main problems with this idea is the clumsiness of it. You whistle and you alert half the guards on the map, but you don't realise you've alerted one guy to you on the opposite side of the map. You whistle again later on in the heist, suddenly he's called the police immediately and they're there. So the idea of allowing you to whistle, shout, or whisper drags in the radius from which they're working, I should say. I've been talking for nearly 20 minutes now without a script or anything. That's why I started making all sorts of verbal mistakes. And so you get more specific results that you want. Really hard to do. Whistle is not a skill I'm confident about how I've balanced it, but I'd love to see that sort of idea added into the game. Next up, we are back round to tier 5 now. This is Bloodlust. For each melee kill made, your movement speed and melee swing speed increases by 5% with max stacks of 10. Each stack lasts for 45 seconds. Let's talk about this separately because the second part's a little bit separate. So, as I've already pointed out, movement speed and swing speed is important for melee weapons. Speed and tankiness, my two main objectives with this tree. But maximum of 50% faster movement and swing speed, that's huge. But bear in mind, you only have 45 seconds for each kill to count. Once that 45 seconds up, you're going to lose that 5% movement speed. But if you're making successive kills, you can maintain it all the way at the top. It's a risk versus reward thing, and it's a going hard or going home idea. Melee strikes on knockdown law enforcers do 100% additional damage. Again, knockdown becoming more and more important in my opinion, and getting sort of critical hits on knockdown enemies is huge, because really once they're knocked down, either you're going to have you can back away from them, they'll be weaker, they won't hit you as much, or you can take them out. It lets you make a decision based off the situation and be more pragmatic about it. Finally, the tier bonus on this tier 5 is to regenerate 15% of your maximum health every 30 seconds. Longevity is so important when you're taking shots all the time. Next up we have Bloodforge. Each melee strike bloodies your eyes, healing for 3% of your maximum health. This was an idea I've had for a really long time. The idea of a sort of lifesteal mechanic in Payday 2 if you're going to have melee weapons. But also, because this seems so strong in my eyes, being able to heal for 3% per swing, bearing in mind you're already swinging ridiculously fast if you've got the right skills, and some of the melee weapons already swing quickly. I had to be careful with how I balanced this, so basically blood splatters onto your screen, makes your vision much more blurred each and every time. It gets worse and worse. That only lasts for about 10 seconds per hit until it starts to fade away. So it gives this idea that you're sort of losing it in the fight. Think of the Psycho out of Borderlands. You guys might remember the montage I made based around that. Next up, if we ace it out, killing an enemy while they are knocked down has a 15% chance to fully heal you and perform a special animation. My inspiration on this one was actually the Dead Island finishing move when enemies are down on the floor. And the idea of it fully healing you was, again, drawn inspiration from Borderlands and the idea behind Krieg. But 15% chance is not going to happen all the time. You first of all have to kill the enemy while they're knocked down. Not just hit them while they're knocked down, and it has to be a finishing blow for this to happen. So not the easiest thing to proc, a bit of a not a sort of skill that I would think I would pick up myself, but it's a bit of fun. It's kind of like 9 lives. That's the way I see this skill. Next up, we have the stealth skill for tier 5. It is kunai. Melee needs a little bit of range in there for it to really stand up, given that there are pretty restrictive invisible walls that stop you hitting all enemies on the map. I definitely wanted some sort of ranged option. This range option came in with the idea of the kunai. Even though you're not actually going to be throwing kunai, you're going to be throwing some sort of dagger or dirk at the enemy. So adds 3 ranged throwing weapons to your inventory that can be picked up. So you can pick it up on the corpse, so you can pick it up out the wall you threw it at. It deals 75 base damage, so that's relatively powerful, with a ×10 headshot multiplier. That's insta-gib for cloakers, basically, but you've got to be accurate. Risk versus reward. Then if you ace this out, you get 2 more knives in your inventory, that's 5 overall, which all can be picked up, but can be lost if you throw them outside the map. And it adds a special finishing move while undetected by specials below 75%. Remember I talk about soft stealthing. Soft stealthing is when enemies are unable to find you when you're in combat, when you're being assaulted, and once you've broken stealth. And I'd like to play around with this mechanic, and seeing how melee is so weak against enemies like bulldozers, and it can be quite weak against shields and even tasers, my idea behind this one was if you're able to catch him by surprise, if you're able to approach the heist a little differently and use your distractions that already exist in the mission, be they teammates or sentry guns or any of your other ideas, you can quickly kill a bulldozer at 75% health without any repercussions. You're still able to do melee even on the highest difficulties where specials are a consistent threat. So that's the idea behind that one. Now, Be Like Water is where we start getting very complex. We're on tier 6 now. These are the most important skills. These are the ones where you really are choosing between the 3 of them. Blunt and bladed melee weapons now have additional categorization. Blunt has a 25% chance of hitting for 2 times damage, basically a critical hit, and bladed has a 20% chance of causing bleed for 30 damage over 5 seconds, so that's ticking 6 damage a second. Doesn't seem like a lot, but it will stack up to 3 times, so you can actually do 90 damage over 5 seconds if you're fast enough with your melee weapon hits. Then there is an increased chance of both occurring by 15%, so that's really going to make bleed quite strong. I'm a little worried about my balancing for that one. And crits now slow enemy movement by 50% for 4 seconds, and bleed increases melee damage from all sources by 30%. So once you've got them bleeding, your next swing is going to hit that much harder, and it may proc bleed again. Basically, Be Like Water is a bit of a scary skill. I'm not sure if I balanced it quite the way I wanted it to be, but do keep in mind, when you're choosing this skill, you're competing with some of the best other skills in the game. Bulletproof, for example. Let me think of another really strong skill. Mag Plus, I believe, Mag Plus is top tier. Just ridiculously strong skills, and so this has to be ridiculously strong, really. The one of these top tier 6 skills that I wasn't as keen on was the Vanguard idea. But it is something that definitely adds different options for melee weapons, a more defensive playstyle for our support tree. Vanguard adds a riot shield as an optional primary weapon. It protects the back while unequipped, but you move 10% slower while carrying it. It deals 30 damage a hit and 150 knockdown. You can't charge it, basically because you always have to keep it in front of you. So that's a decent amount of knockdown. The damage isn't that stellar, but don't forget you're going to be protected from bullets coming at you at the front while you've got it out in front of you, and if you're just using your secondary weapon, you're completely protected from behind, or not completely, but the vast majority of your back is. Then if you ace this out, the riot shield can be planted in the ground and replaced by a random unmodified inventory weapon. This part was kind of hard for me to think of. How am I going to make it so it's worth planting it in the ground? Well, I didn't want to give you one of your weapons that was fully modified. I didn't want you to pick up an enemy weapon, because I'm not sure they're even designed for that. I don't think you can wield enemy weapons. So I decided just to pick a random weapon from your inventory, but make sure it was unmodified, and with the assumption you're not specced into it. So it's not too powerful, but you can use the riot shield then as a stationary shield, and it gives buffs in the area. All allies in a 10 meter radius have a 20% greater chance to dodge bullets and deal 10% extra damage. Last but not least, we have Nightingale. Nightingale is the stealth option, and it's not pure stealth. The idea behind Nightingale was it let you enter into a mission as a stealth melee user, but actually convert yourself into a very viable heist member if things go south and the alarms go off. So guards now make 100% more noise while moving and speaking. This is pure stealth. I want to talk about this because it would definitely involve some sort of change in the game that I'd like to see anyway. I'd love guards to have more interaction with each other. Lots of stealth games work around that. Guards walk up to each other, they talk to each other, they ask about the wife. How's the wife doing? Oh, it's alright, Jeff. But you can hear this. It should be a cue for stealth, in my opinion. But you can also hear enemy footsteps louder, and Nightingale allows you to skillfully plan, as opposed to it being oh, there's an enemy stood there, as it is with the spotter perk. It's, I can hear an enemy around the corner, I can pinpoint his location, much more skill based. Then if you ace it out, we move away from the pure stealth into the dodge stat on all armor being multiplied by 2. So the best example is if you have 20 dodge on your armor. I'm trying to think what does. It might be lightweight ballistic that has that. All of a sudden you have 40 dodge. That's a large amount of bullet dodge ability. And coupled with some of the perks, you might end up becoming a little bit indestructible. It's impossible. Without the means to test, without the means to try it out in the game, it's tough to balance. But I like the idea. Armor which has 0, for example, the improved combined tactical vest, the Juggernaut suit basically, that gets 5 additional dodge. So even if you're running that, you do get some reward. Also, the kunai now has a vital bleed status, dealing 150 damage over 10 seconds. Kunai didn't previously have a bleed. I needed the melee the throw melee weapon to basically stand up to the held melee weapon, and this was the way I thought of doing it. Again, while they're bleeding, you can do even more damage with your next throw, or something along those lines. Stacking damage is something I really enjoy. Finally, the tier 6 tier bonus is quite important. You can replace your secondary weapon with a second melee weapon. This means you can have a bladed and a blunt weapon. Or if you want to, you can have a stealth weapon and a loud assault weapon. It allows you to be more versatile, and hopefully if they added some more different melee weapons with different unique effects, this could really come into fruition. It might be a bit too powerful as a tier bonus though, with all these additional skills, something I definitely look to maybe altering. Now this has been a 30+ minute video of me rambling about my own skill tree. Guys, if you have your own skill tree ideas, make a video about them. If you guys have your own ideas for new equipment, new heists, let Overkill know. Let everybody know in the community, basically, because it's going to be such a big thing with Payday, or so I hope, once this workshop feature is added. And if you guys have the skill to create this sort of thing once the workshop is added, you guys are who we as a community are going to turn to. So that is it for my strange rambling rant about my skill tree. It took absolutely ages to make. I hope you have enjoyed it, and I hope you've sat through, well, actually no, if you've sat through this entire thing, I tip my hat to you. I'm not sure I'm even going to get the damn gameplay to fill in a 31-minute long video. Wish me luck, guys. I will see you all in the next one. Phew.